Welcome back to Gems Podcast. I'm your host, Genesis Amaris Kemp, and with me today is Jeff Davis. Here's a bit about Jeff. He's an entrepreneur who went from working every night and every weekend with 80 plus hour work weeks to traveling for 2 years with his family, seeing 29 countries, all while growing his business. He attributes making that life changing leap from being stuck in the day to day weeds to being able to travel and focus on the vision to doing seven particular things. When any other entrepreneurs go through these same seven steps, they also build dramatically more scalable businesses. They start growing their companies with more freedom to focus on the bigger impact things, and they're also able to pursue other passions in their lives. Today, you all will get to hear the opportunity from founder and chairman of a national community of entrepreneurs and CEOs pull back the curtain on seven steps to getting out of the day-to-day weeds of any business. And without further ado, please welcome Jeff Davis, who's going to teach us those seven steps so we can get out of those day-to-day weeds and start living the life that we want on our own terms.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Thank you, Jeff. So, Jeff, your bio is just a bio. So, I want you to tell us what's a wild card factor that obviously my community doesn't know, and maybe your community doesn't know about you.
Um, I don't know. I think lots of different things in my life that seem all completely unrelated sort of all put a dent into shaping who I turned out to be. I was a skateboarder flying down steps and flying up ramps. I dissected human cadavers in grad school. I've had an interesting path. I would say I have an artist's brain, kind of like literally have a Master of Fine Arts degree, and but I'm also very entrepreneurial and have that business side, which is, I guess, kind of one of my unique abilities is you don't usually have both of those kind of things. It's one or the other sometimes, but I guess, yeah, I would say doing a kickflip down some steps and knowing all of the parts of the brachial plexus in a cadaver is kind of the range.
That is super cool. So, you have a little bit of everything in your think tank. And when did you decide that, you know what, I'm hitting that point in my career where all of these hours are not fulfilling me and they don't complement my purpose in life? And I really need to take a step back and spend some time with my family. What was that driving factor that pushed you into that?
Yeah, it was a gradual buildup of pain. I think entrepreneurs are hard workers and optimistic people, and we're willing to take on a lot. And I think it's one of those things where it just builds and builds and builds and builds, where you don't even realize how much pressure and stress and fatigue you're going through until you get to sort of a tipping point. For me, that tipping point was, I mean, after a couple of years of working every night and every weekend, and then my wife and I had our first child. And the morning after the baby was born, I had to go to the hospital. I mean, I had to leave the hospital to go to my office because I was so entrenched in every aspect of my business. I said, I'll be right back. I just got to go in for a minute. And then I came back hours later. And at the time, I was having a lot of successes professionally, but I couldn't have felt like a bigger loser when I was coming back to the hospital after hours when I said I'd just be a few minutes. But it was my own fault because I had just gotten so entrenched in all the minutia, in the weeds of the business.
Do you ever feel like it took a toll on your marriage or family dynamics since you were so entrenched with your work? Because you had that professional success, but then personally, you mentioned that you felt like a loser because you weren't maybe holding up to certain obligations.
Yeah, for me, I remember, I mean, it was still young, and I remember thinking to myself, I don't think I'm going to feel like I'm winning if I'm celebrating revenue with like wife number six. Like to me, that just didn't, that wasn't what I was looking to accomplish. And so I became fanatical about not just revenue, but being healthy, being happy, having a good marriage, being a good dad, having time to enjoy life. So all that stuff. I think for a long time I always looked at a more holistic view of what quote unquote success is, and it was never just sales or just a dollar amount in the bank.
That's great. And thank you for sharing that because I think that's going to connect with some of the listeners and viewers. And now let's unpack the 7 steps. And did you find these 7 steps whenever you stepped away from your job and went on that the 2 years to travel?
Yeah, I would say some of it came before the year of travel, and it's what enabled me to do a year of travel. A lot of it was from experimenting, lessons learned, a lot of explosions. That blew. I thought I had it figured out, and then it blew up in my face and got more expensive and took more time and got more stressful. And then trying this, and then trying this, and you know, over time. Not it wasn't like an overnight thing. And then yeah, from learning, from actually leaving and disconnecting from being in the city where my business started, forced me into figuring out certain things. But also along the way, we have our community of CEOs, 12 Mavens, and one of the things we do for the members is go out every month and pick the brains of highly successful entrepreneurs, CEOs, experts on different topics, which includes, the CEOs of Inc. 500 companies, New York Times bestselling authors, and pretty successful people, and learning from them, learning from, I've personally sat in, I couldn't even tell you how many hours of CEO roundtable groups at this point. And so from those conversations, from what's working and what's not working, from my own experience, it's all of it.
Nice. So let's really unpack step by step. I want you to talk about those 7 steps and kind of lay it out on the table for us, Jeff.
Sorry, I couldn't hear you there for a second.
So I want you to unpack the 7 steps, what they are, and just lay it out on the table so we can kind of get a glimpse, and then we're going to tie that back into the 12 mavens.
Okay. The first step is just mapping out an actual detailed written plan. Most people, they hope for something, or they want something, or they have some general ideas of how they maybe could do it. But if I were to say, show me the plan, let's look at it, let's analyze it week by week, month by month, how is it going to happen for you? There isn't one, or it's just little bits and pieces. So the first thing is to actually write out your detailed written plan. You could always tweak it. You can always, there'll be curves in the road. You can always figure them out as you get there. But number one is map out that detailed plan. Number two is to build out a leadership and support team. A lot of times, there's that founder, and then they do all this work, and maybe they get a little bit of help here or a little bit of help here, but you don't want to be this one genius with 100 helpers. You want to actually have like proper support and be building out. Obviously you have to save, you have to raise capital, whatever you do to get the money, but to be building out a leadership team, a support team that includes like a really skilled executive assistant, maybe some virtual assistants that can take some of that administrative weight off of you. The third is to become a master at delegating. so many people get frustrated when they ask somebody to do something and it doesn't turn out the way they want, because of the way that they delegated it. I've taken courses, read books on delegation, learned a lot from trial and error. But if you've ever asked somebody to do something that you thought should take about an hour and a week later they still haven't done it, it's very likely that it's your fault. Did you tell them I need this by tomorrow at 3 o'clock, or did you just assume that it would only take about an hour, right? So being skilled at delegation, knowing how to delegate, it is an art, but also it is a science. Number 4, systematize your processes so that they work with or without you. So every business has systems and processes. They may not know it, they may not have actually formally documented them, but there are ways that they do stuff. And so it's actually documenting the way everything gets done. What's your process for if somebody calls in sick? What's your process for posting a job, interviewing, onboarding a new hire? What's your process for generating leads? What's your sales process? Like fully step-by-step thought out. And then figuring out ways to take yourself out of those processes. So as you're documenting them, you're making sure that you are in as few of the steps as possible. And the ultimate euphoria is you're not even in any of them. Number 5 is to make the time to learn how to do this stuff that we're talking about. It's ironic that, the people that are stuck in the day-to-day of their business are too busy to learn how to not be stuck in the day-to-day of their business. It's one of those things that's so obvious, but it's also probably the number one reason why people are stuck in the day-to-day, because they're too busy, quote unquote, to learn how to fix the problem. So that's why I say make the time, right? You have to make the time for what's important. I always tell people, if, God forbid, one of their immediate relatives passed away, they will make the time for the funeral, right? So when it's important enough, you make the time, but you have to make that time. Number 6 is to get over guilt issues, ego, your own limiting beliefs, right? If you just naturally kind of feel guilty if you're not the first one in and the last one out, that's something you have to get over. I had that problem. I'd get there before everybody else. I'd be as productive as I could all day. And some days I checked all my boxes and it was about time to go home. And if I still had employees there, I felt like I can't leave before them. I'd just find something else to do until every last one had left, until I eventually, got over that. Ego, it feels good to be the hero. You kind of want to be that star player on the team, that when you get injured, the team starts losing, because it feels good that you're so good. But you want the exact opposite. You want the team to be able to be great, even if you weren't around anymore. And then limiting beliefs, we have this doubt that we can do it, or we've just told ourselves this story a million times of why it has to be us to do this, it has to be us to do this, and we're blocking ourselves from making that next step, right? And then number 7 is leveraging other CEOs' hindsight, and taking advantage of all these other business leaders' past experiences of how they've figured out ways to be more productive, or to manage their time better, or to automate things, or how they're outsourcing things, or how they're cutting things out from their day as CEOs, right? Leveraging all these other CEOs. And at the same time, when you're taking all of these different CEOs and business leaders' hindsight and combining all of their brain power together at the same time on thinking and problem solving and figuring out things and brainstorming on ideas, it's so much more powerful than one individual brain. And also leveraging CEOs' hindsight and their group thinking, but also the accountability of your peers. So if you're putting all three of those, I kind of combine all of that together into one thing, right? And it's just leveraging the power of other entrepreneurs and CEOs.
Those are really great steps there, Jeff. And I want to thank you for elaborating on each one of them. And would you say that the steps have to be followed in sequential order, or do you recommend going um, out of order, and why?
That's a good question. And I would say it doesn't have to be like exactly 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. But I would say, if anything, I would start with having some kind of a plan as a starting point. But at the same time, if you don't have the right mindset, like that, it was all the way at number 6, about getting over guilt and ego and limiting beliefs. So, I don't think it has to be 1 and then 2 and then 3. If you have a good assistant helping you, that can free you up to do some of these other things that I mentioned. If you've mastered delegation, then that would be helpful to do that before you have all these processes and systems starting, firing off. But they're not in that order. Like you have to do step 1 first and then 2. They're a suggestion in that order. But I feel very strongly about that last one of the 3 all combined together, because and as I'm talking about this, I'm like kind of wanting to completely scramble up those 7 steps, and then a month from now I might want to re-scramble it again. But I'm thinking, if you have the other CEOs that you're brainstorming with, they might help craft a better plan. They might help you pick out a better leadership team and a better executive assistant for like what's worked and not worked for them. They might be able to help you craft the way you're delegating and tell you why you're being frustrated. So yeah, you can do them in a number of orders.
Yeah, the reason why I asked that question is because I think starting with having that mindset shift and the overall paradigm shift helps you make sure that the rest of the steps are going to be followed. And if I could add, I really like that you talked about delegation. And I know some people are afraid to delegate. So you could delegate, but also proof your delegation by implementing some audits to ensure what you delegated is running properly. Then when it comes to planning and processes, make sure that you have SOPs, so standard operating procedures. And as things shift in your business, make sure you are keeping those procedures evergreen, and make sure that it's across the board, like every person in each department knows about that SOP, and cross train, because if someone is out for maybe maternity or paternity leave, or something happens, you want to make sure that you have somebody lined up that knows how to take ownership of that role, so you're not missing out, and you're not allowing a big educational gap to walk out the door and then something fails. And then automation, think about ways that you could work smarter, not necessarily harder. Where does it make sense to outsource? And does it make sense financially? And does it make sense based on your business setup? You could outsource your CRM. You could outsource some of the administrative skills, because if you have an online business, maybe you hire a few VAs, virtual assistants, and etc. There are so many different things that you could think about. And then also make sure that you're protecting yourself and your business by having non-competes, NDAs, which are non-disclosure agreements, and etc., because you don't want to let somebody walk out the door and then take your ideas and build upon it. And then before you know it, they're a competitor. So really think about those things in business and really apply the 7 steps that Jeff talked about. And do an audit on yourself and business on a quarterly or a annually basis to make sure those 7 steps are still working for you.
Well said.
And then Jeff, I want you to talk about the 12 Mavens. How did you form the 12 Mavens and what are the core pillars around it?
Thank you. 12 Mavens is one of those examples of somebody just starting something that they wanted and needed for themselves. I was, early 30s, guns blazing, had some early successes and just kept going for the next thing and the next thing. And I did something without getting any outside counsel. And I watched a lot of money disappear over the next 6 months. And I remember going through a ton of pain and like literally waking up in the middle of the night feeling like I'm suffocating almost, just watching, what I had saved for years just depleting quickly and thinking, man, if I had just thrown that idea out in front of a few other entrepreneurs, and if just one of them, kind of poked a stick at it and say, yeah, what happens if this happens? And I was like, oh, that's true. I might have just drawn a line through the idea and I would have never known how valuable that 15-minute conversation would have been, instead of going through the agony that I went through, and so that made me want to not do some of those gunslinging decisions, without first having the outside perspectives and, that confidential think tank that I could lean on and mitigate risk with. Really, that's what it is. I mean, after going through that much pain and then getting to the complete other side of the spectrum where I did build the business up, did get it to run without me, and then I was able to sell the whole company, I wanted to help as many other entrepreneurs avoid that pain as possible. When I thought about how many times I was in my office until 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning, and wanting to help some other dad or mom avoid that and just be able to spend that time with their spouse and kids, that was like, I'll do whatever I can for that. And so it started with a single group of a few other entrepreneurs. And it was one of those things where it was like, yeah, we talked about, you'll get like, business ideas, marketing best practices, hiring best practices, how to access capital. We can talk about all that stuff. But really, the thing all along that I was the most excited about was making that person happier and more, having a better quality of life, which, I realized the more I talked about, the less interested people were. It just seemed like kind of fluffy, soft, whatever stuff. And then we talk, if we talk about real world things like, delegation and automation and systems and hiring good people and all that kind of stuff, then we'll just get them there that way.
And why the name 12 Mavens or Mavens?
Yeah. A maven is somebody who shares their wisdom and knowledge with others. It's actually a super old word, but it just kind of disappeared for a long time. I think maybe it was Malcolm Gladwell that sort of kind of brought it back. He mentioned it in a couple of his books. I remember hearing it as a kid. But so the concept is, if you take 12 people that all are sharing their wisdom and knowledge with others all at the same time, that's a pretty powerful thing. And we call it that, but we have plenty of meetings. It's not exactly 12. It's like if we have 11 mavens, it's still an amazing meeting.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that because I was like, there has to be a reason why he named it 12 Mavens. And then, Jeff, as we begin to wind down, I want you to leave our listeners and viewers with a call to action for this segment. What do you want them to do?
I want them to, like you said, take action, and wishing and hoping aren't going to do it. I wished and hoped for a long time. It wasn't until I reached my pain threshold that I remember literally crying and my wife and I hugging and telling her I'm gonna figure this out. I promise you, because she deserved better than just being there by herself every night and all weekend. And so the best way to do that, what changed my life, was actually taking the time to from all the in the business stuff, and I got around other smart, driven entrepreneurs, and everything changed. We went to work on all these things together. I like having conversations with entrepreneurs that are serious about scaling their companies and having a good life, and that's why I like meeting privately, on occasion. Usually, for years I haven't done them myself, but lately I've been jumping into them myself. Again, but if you go to 12mavens.com/session, 12mavens.com/session, you can book a time that we can talk privately about your top objectives, your biggest obstacles, your biggest frustrations, and kind of carve out a plan. My only caveat is I have very limited amount of time, and I just reserve it for people that are actually actively growing a business. If you're aspiring, this might not be for you, but that would be the call to action.
And if anyone is aspiring to connect with you outside of this segment, where do you hang out on social media? We have your website, which is www.12mavens, MAVENS.com. And then if you're interested in the session, you go back /session. So I want you to plug them on your social media so they could follow you along this path.
Yeah, I'm mostly, I would say, LinkedIn. I had them all. I got tired of them all, and it was terrible because it's so important for marketing these days. If yeah, I'm on LinkedIn, Jeff Davis. You just got to skim through all the other Jeff Davises to find me, I guess. And then if you're curious to see parts of when I did go to 29 countries, I did document a good bit of the journey. You could on YouTube. If you go on YouTube and type The Climb with Jeff Davis, The Climb with Jeff Davis, you can see me in France, Italy, Spain, Ireland, England. I don't remember at what point I got tired of doing it, but they're pretty entertaining.
And there you have it, listeners and viewers of GEMS Podcast. Once again, I'm your host, Genesis Amaris Kemp, and you just heard the pleasure of hearing Jeff Davis with 12 Mavens. All of his contact information will be in the show notes so you could connect with him. And until we chat next time, peace, love, and lots of blessings. Don't forget to subscribe and share this segment. We're on 40 plus platforms, and follow us on YouTube at GEMS with Genesis Amaris Kemp for all things video content. And remember, you can release the inner maven in you, level up your business, and scale up as long as you follow the 7 steps that were mentioned in this segment. Until we chat next time, ciao.